This story takes place in a small town in coastal North Carolina. Correctional Officer Tony Roberts was preparing to go work the night shift at the correctional institution. After getting dressed in his uniform, he grabbed his keys and left his home. He got into his car and started the engine and pulled his car out on U.S. Highway 117. The drive was always uneventful. It was late March of 2015, so daylight savings time had just went into effect and the orange sun was still hanging just above the treetops. He checked his phone and he had 3 missed calls with messages, but discarded it until he got to work to check them. He turned on a CD and mumbled the lyrics of the song that was playing. As he passed over the I-40 interstate bridge, he glanced to his left toward his grandmother's home and saw her sitting on the porch in her rocking chair. He beat the horn and waved. She returned the gesture. After he passed the house, he suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to turn around and visit with her for a few minutes. He checked his watch. He had about 45 minutes before shift lineup, so he pulled into a local gas station and turned his car around and pulled back onto the road. As he approached his grandmother's home, she was still sitting in the rocking chair. He pulled into her driveway and exited his car. According to Tony, she was very happy he had stopped. The following conversation was as close as could Tony remember it. "Hey, Nana." "Tony, how are you, sweetheart?" Tony stated that he then climbed the tiny 3-brick steps, grabbed another chair. He sat down beside her. "Not much. Just heading to work, Nana. I saw you sitting out looking at the sunset and decided to stop and say hi. I am so glad that you did." "Where's Grandpa?" Tony asked. She hesitated for a few seconds. Tony also stated that she seemed a bit confused, but he had dismissed it. Suddenly, and without warning, reached and grabbed his hand. It was clammy and cold. He went out for a little while. She smiled reassuringly. Tony thought for a moment, and that nothing out of the ordinary. He would often go into town and grab dinner for the both of them. He looked down at her hand that embraced in his. "Tony, I want you to start back going to church." "I know. I am going to start back. You've told me that before, sweetheart. You need to get back to your walk with the Lord, and I want you to quit that terrible job. I know, Nana, but it has good benefits, and the pay is very good. The Lord has so much more to give to you. You just have to trust in Him." Tony looked down at his watch. It was 6:45 p.m. Shift lineup was at 7 p.m. "I need to get to work, Nana. I'm running late. I love you." Tony stood up and kissed her on her forehead and stepped down off the porch and headed to his car. "Tony, promise me that you will think about what I said. I love you too, sweetheart." He then got into his car and sped away. Later that evening after shift lineup, he was assigned to Dorm F at the correctional facility. As he sat at the control desk, tallying the inmate head count, another officer walked in. "Roberts, they want you in the sergeant's office," the officer said. "I am here to relieve you." That was odd. What had he done? "Okay, did they say why?" he asked. "No, man. They just said go relieve Roberts in F dorm," the officer replied. Tony grabbed his things and handed his keys to the relieving officer and exited the dorm. The walk to the sergeant's office was about 2 minutes. When he entered the well-lit office, Sergeant Peters was there clearing the count. He looked up as Tony entered. "Hey, Roberts, you need to make contact with your father. He said he has tried calling you several times, but hasn't been able to get a hold of you." Tony thought for a moment. Why was his dad trying to get up with him at work? That was definitely out of the ordinary. "Sure thing. I will step outside and give him a ring." "No problem," the sergeant replied as he resumed his paperwork. Tony stepped back outside in the brisk air and dialed his dad's number. The phone rang only once. "Tony?" his father's voice pleaded. "Hi, Dad. What's up?" "Listen, I need for you to leave work and get to the hospital as fast as you can," his father's voice replied. Tony's senses heightened. "Why? What's wrong?" he asked. "Just get in your car and get here," his father said again. "Okay, on my way." Tony burst back into the sergeant's office. Sergeant Peters was startled. "Sarg, I've got to get to the hospital." "Go, man, go," Peters exclaimed. Tony began to run from the office to the gatehouse. The gatekeepers unlocked the doors and he began to sprint to his car. The hospital was only 8 blocks away from the correctional facility. He got into his car and sped out of the parking lot to the hospital. Once he arrived, his dad was waiting for him in the main lobby. "Dad, "What's going on?" His dad calmed him down a bit before he spoke. "It's your grandma." Granddad came home and found her unresponsive. Tony's breathing became more labored. Is she okay?" he pleaded. "No, son. She passed." Tony felt the warm tears as they began to run involuntarily down his face. He embraced his dad in a long embrace and let out a bear-like cry as he broke down in sobs. "Where is she?" Tony asked. "She's in the back in the emergency room," he replied. "I want to see her." His father nodded and led him down the hallway into a well-lit, typical ER facility. He saw his granddad sitting in a chair in an almost catatonic state. He could hear his mother sobbing as he got closer to the room. As he walked in, he saw his grandmother laying on the bed. Trash from IVs and monitors littered the floor around her. She had on the same gown that she had on when he had stopped to see her earlier that evening. He took her hand, the same hand that had embraced his only hours ago. Tony then spoke. "She was just fine when I stopped to see her this afternoon," he said to no one in particular. "When did this happen?" he asked his father. "Your grandfather found her about 4:30. All of a sudden, a warm wave swept over him, and he knew that couldn't be right. "Did you say 4:30? Tony asked. "Yeah. I tried to call you several times, but it kept going to your voicemail." Tony then remembered checking his phone and saw he had some missed calls. "I had to go pick up your mother. She couldn't drive from work in her state. I figured you were asleep because you had to work tonight. So, we waited until we got here, and I called the prison," his father continued. Dad, that is impossible. I stopped at her house around 6:30 and we sat on the porch and talked," Tony said. His dad just looked at him. "No, son. She passed around 6:30. From that night on, Tony never went back to work as a correctional officer. He is currently the youth pastor at his local church and is going to seminary next fall to become a full-time licensed pastor. The story of Tony Roberts is somewhat conflicting. During his interview, Tony stated that the event happened a while back, and there were some issues in remembering. We examined the concept of a deceased loved one returning and offering wisdom. We found that the Old Testament contains various passages that hint at visitations from the dead. One notable example comes from 1 Samuel 28:7 through 20, where King Saul consults the ghost of the prophet Samuel. This encounter shows a direct interaction between the living and the spirit of a deceased person, underscoring the belief in the afterlife, although this was likely to have been a direct and allowable visit by God. But again, the interaction between Tony and his grandmother could have been as well.